Welcome to episode 17 of the G2 on 5G. It's our first standalone edition, and we're pleased today to have John Saw. John's a former Sprint CTO, and now he's the Executive Vice President of Advanced and Emerging Technology for the new T-Mobile. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're pleased to have you.
Sure.
Yeah, we're pleased to have you. And our firm, More Insights and Strategy, has been following the Sprint T-Mobile merger for quite some time. Both Anshel and I and Patrick have written numerous articles on Forbes, and I'd like to say that we saw the value from the very beginning. There were lots of doubters, but we saw, those incredible spectrum assets coming together, and Sprint's bringing a balance of enterprise to a very consumer-centric T-Mobile to really combine into a powerhouse. So we are pleased to have you, and I'm going to kick things off with my first question. And your title is very descriptive, and I know on a recent analyst call, you talked a little bit about compelling 5G use cases. I think there are plenty that are obvious in the consumer space, low latency mobile gaming, these sorts of things. But I believe the transformative aspects of 5G are really going to bear fruit within the enterprise. So we'd love to hear your input on where you see some of the most impactful 5G use cases.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show again. And I can go on for hours talking about 5G and 5G use cases. I think the three of us have been exposed to all the Gs in wireless, right? I really think that, 5G is the first G designed from the ground up to meet the needs of many vertical industries. As good as LTE is, it is simply a very generic data layer. Right. But 5G is an umbrella of options that has focused from the beginning on features and capabilities that we need to transform vertical applications. Ultra reliable, low latency features will enable many industrial and control applications that you just cannot do with LTE. Right. But the vision for compelling 5G use cases can only be realized with a nationwide 5G network that has the depth and capacity and the breadth and coverage to enable all these use cases. You simply cannot do it if a network only has 0.4% of 5G availability, even after 2 years of trying, right? And if you look at T-Mobile, we are building a network that can support all 5G use cases and fuel innovation across every industry. I mean, we have, we now control more than 300 megahertz of sub-6 gigahertz spectrum, low and mid-band spectrum. That is twice what AT&T has and 3 times Verizon's holding. And oh, by the way, we actually hold more millimeter wave spectrum than AT&T. So with such a rich spectrum asset, and Will, you call it right from the get-go like years ago, right? With such a rich spectrum asset finally put together with a merger, I say bring on the use cases, right? And part of my job at T-Mobile is try to fuel innovation and build an ecosystem of 5G services and applications. Simply said, we have to build something bigger than ourselves. We have a number of incubator type programs in place. We run the accelerator in Kansas City. We are a founding member of the 5G Open Innovation Lab with Intel and NASA in Seattle. In just the last few months, we have come across a number of interesting startups working on some really cool use cases. Autonomous drone swarms that are currently being used to fight COVID-19 in the UK by disinfecting public places. I mean, just 90 days ago, if you tell me this is a use case, I would think you must be dreaming. But it seems perfectly normal now to spray disinfectant on public places to save lives, right? We are looking at holographic video conferencing with volumetric spatial processing with a startup. Wearables such as helmets for live streaming of professional sports, glasses that make our screen the world around us. They are no longer limited by a smartphone. AR and VR platforms to train frontline workers and students, especially now with distance learning becoming the norm rather than the exception. A local agricultural company now is using robots for greenhouse farming. We have a company that's building a solution for more predictive food supply chains, right? These incubator programs are so exciting, and the current, the creativity around new disruptive 5G use cases are virtually endless, right?
Right.
LTE helped build companies like Uber and Lyft and TikTok and Snapchat. I really cannot wait to see who will become the next Uber in healthcare, in manufacturing and in automotive. So it's a very exciting space. And the thing with T-Mobile is that we actually have the network to support all this.
It's absolutely critical. And, you touched on ride sharing, LTE helped birth that. And I'm equally excited about like what's lurking around the corner, because no one saw that coming. It completely disrupted an industry that needed to be disrupted, to deliver better service and better pricing and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you touched on ag tech, and that's an area that I think can also really benefit from 5G. But I think, you touched on it. An operator has to have the right spectrum footprint. You have to have low, mid, and high band for the millimeter wave, type connectivity to be able to serve all of that. And I think, what you're talking about, I mean, it's transformative. It's saving lives with COVID. It's improving agriculture technology that can improve and increase the food supply. So it's really exciting. And that sort of leads to my second question. And well before the merger, when Sprint and T-Mobile were separate companies, one of the things that I was very critical about T-Mobile was that it was very consumer focused, and it did an exceptional job providing great, value and benefits to consumers, but was very light on, enterprise. And often, when I would ask the question, the answer I would receive was, well, we're going to deliver lower pricing to the enterprise. And as we all know, that's not sustainable. But one of the things that was exciting to me about the two companies coming together was Sprint's enterprise acumen. And you've for many years you supported enterprise type services. Recently, SD-WAN and that sort of thing. So I'm curious, as you join Neville's team, what experience are you going to lean into to bring more of a balance to the new T-Mobile, so that you're meeting the bar not only from a consumer services perspective, but an enterprise services perspective?
Yeah, so very good question, Will. Just to cut to the chase, enterprise at new T-Mobile is going to be a growth area for us, simply because there's so much untapped potential with this network that we are building. Right, my 5G experience at Sprint, gave me some very good insights into what enterprises are looking for with 5G. If you remember, in the early days of 5G, we built a number of 5G test beds for enterprise use, like Peachtree Corners in Georgia, and in Greenville, South Carolina, for testing autonomous vehicles. Right, but despite the strength that Sprint had with enterprise and the array of big customers, the Sprint 5G network is built using just the mid-band 2.5 spectrum, right? And we lack the low-band spectrum by 600 to build a more ubiquitous footprint to fully support the 5G, enterprise services. Now, we fast forward to today, to new T-Mobile, we have a much richer spectrum position, right? And we can therefore build a more compelling nationwide 5G network to really take on the enterprise space and go big time. And go even bigger than what Sprint has, right? In fact, I think our goal at new T-Mobile is to become the #1 mobile provider for businesses.
Wow.
Right? We believe our network capability that we're building with 5G will allow us to leapfrog AT&T and Verizon by offering the biggest and best 5G network, the best support, and the best value. And on top of that, my new role at T-Mobile is to, like Mike Sievert said, try to look around the corner on what's next in the enterprise space, and how best can we leverage 5G to transform their businesses, right? So my team is working closely with Mike Katz's team in T-Mobile for Business in looking for what kind of partnerships we can develop, right? And what kind of advanced capabilities we need to build on top of this 5G network to serve the full range of use cases. So it's a very exciting time, and I think putting Sprint and T-Mobile together with the spectrum assets, with some good momentum on the enterprise, is going to take us to the next level as far as transforming the enterprise space with some of our biggest customers.
Yeah, no, it seems like you're hitting on all cylinders, and I'm going to hand the second half of our broadcast over to
Okay.
Anshel, and he wants to talk a little bit about your recent standalone announcement. So Anshel, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So I was curious about, how does the recent standalone announcement and the broad spectrum footprint, relating to the layered cake kind of drive real digital transformation in ways that maybe 4G hadn't before, or, previous 5G networks that were not as complete could?
Sure. So standalone is a massive milestone, and being first to launch standalone 5G is going to give us, the edge that I just talked about. And kudos to our CTO Abdul Saad and his team for pushing this through. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of work, right? So standalone removes our dependency on LTE. You're no longer anchored to the older technology, and therefore it can expand our footprint and lower our latencies, right? Simply because it's a more efficient core. With this deployment of standalone so far, we are already seeing a 30% coverage improvement to cover 250 million people. That's the biggest 5G network in the world today, right? And our engineers are already seeing, significant improvement in latency as we continue to optimize our standalone network, right? And you couple all this, Anshel, with the fact that T-Mobile is the only operator with sufficient fresh spectrum in all the 5G bands, like you mentioned, like low band, mid band, and high band. And we are well positioned to help transform and disrupt many vertical industries, be it massive IoT using low band spectrum in agriculture and in oil and gas in rural areas, right? To wearables, right? Using our mid-band spectrum in metro areas, right? To cloud robotics using our millimeter wave and mid-band spectrum in smart factories, right? So the list of opportunities is there, right? We just have to be able to prioritize and work with our enterprise customers to bring this to life, right? So and then this standalone network, not only gives us better coverage and lower latency, it's also the foundation to unlock many more advanced capabilities like edge computing and network slicing, right? And these in turn will pave the way for applications that require real-time responses, right? Like remote healthcare, massive connectivity such as, mobile augmented and virtual reality, cloud gaming, smart factories, and connected vehicles. So I think, we're off to a great start with not just a 5G network, but the fact that we have now a standalone capability is going to now unlock a lot of new 3GPP releases with 5G that is actually still evolving.
Right. And I feel like one of the things that's really not been talked much about by pretty much anyone is the fact that, standalone brings the ability to do network slicing and how many different applications that brings. Just like as a follow-up, I was kind of curious as to what you think network slicing will enable that wasn't possible before.
Well, basically, network slicing allows us to support, all paradigms with newer concepts. As an example, private networks has been around forever, right? You can either use dedicated spectrum, you can use Wi-Fi, right? But with network slicing, we can bring private networks to a whole new layer, a new level, right? For instance, for IoT, we can actually provide an IoT operator a slice of the network that has its own security capability just for IoT, right? In order to do that, though, you need to be able to slice across not just the radio but also the core, right? Which is easier. Radio is harder, and also the transport, right? Now, all this has been worked in release 15 and in release 16, right? Once this is available, right, you need a standalone core to get, you need edge computing, right? And then you can create these slices for enterprises that require specific capabilities and depending on the use cases, right? And it could be for gaming. You can have like a slice for gaming, a slice for IoT, right, with massive number of machines that has low bandwidth but require real-time capability, right? Obviously, you can do a slice for hotspot, broadband, wireless as well. So again, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. It's going to allow us to actually give some ability for our enterprise customers to get some capabilities that they need, right, without having to own the entire network.
Right.
And also it's going to deliver new monetization opportunities for operators like T-Mobile, right? I think with LTE,
Absolutely.
that was a challenge, right? With the OTTs and, they sort of rode on that, the billions of dollars in investment that the T-Mobiles of the world have put out there. And now with network slicing, you can monetize that pipe. So I think that's super.
There's certainly a good potential there. Absolutely. Yes.
And I guess that leads into my second question, which is kind of based on the idea of, specialized spectrum, which is, have there been any unique challenges with the 2.5 gigahertz rollout, utilizing the Sprint spectrum assets, considering it's a very unique kind of, switch from one carrier to another?
Sure. So the 2.5 spectrum is TDD. That's about the only thing that's unique about it. It is actually one of the largest LTE ecosystem globally today, simply because it's used a lot in Asia as well, and so it's in every iconic smartphone today. So the size of the ecosystem is actually very sizable. And Sprint has been deploying 2.5 gigahertz for years, right? And we have learned a lot from their experience. Which has actually today allow us to roll out 2.5 gigahertz even faster. So I don't see any unsolved issues, right? Maybe if you have asked me this 5 years ago, and I'll say, yeah, it's pretty new. Let's see how China Mobile does. But today, it is one of the largest ecosystems available on pretty much every phone, and it's also a very mature ecosystem that all our RAN vendors support. And I'm actually very impressed with what Ulf and his team has done in terms of the pace of deploying 2.5, which is approaching almost 1,000 sites a month. I think that's what Neville said in the last analyst meeting that you guys were in. And since we're not really building new towers or small cells, it is a fairly predictable process when we add 2.5 to an existing macro tower. All right, and don't forget, with Sprint towers and T-Mobile towers, we actually get to pick, the towers that we need without having to build new ones, right? Which is, to me, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to get the density that is better than the competition, right? And pick the ones that we need.
Right.
And one of the things we learned is that as we add 2.5 to every site, it changes the capacity game on that sector. Right, we see almost an 8 times improvement in over LTE speeds. Average speed moves to about 300 to 400 megabits per second when we have all the 3-layer cakes working in New York. So I think that the rich 2.5 layer is going to give T-Mobile a clear differentiation in 5G. Right, and guess what? So far we're only using 60 to 80 megahertz of that spectrum.
Right.
Imagine. Right, the performance when we actually go full throttle with all 200 megahertz of 2.5 in every market, right? That's a capacity that we have yet to deliver, right? And all this while the competition is struggling to find fresh mid-band spectrum, right? Or doing voodoo math with DSS to magically create 5G capacity when the laws of physics will not allow it. Right. So that's why I feel really good about where we are right now and our ability to lead with 5G, not just to compete, but I believe that T-Mobile will lead with 5G, right? Simply because we have all the assets today that we can bring to use. And Will, to your question, we believe that we are the ones that can really transform the vertical spaces.
Makes sense. Exciting. And I think, the way we see 2.5 gigahertz is definitely as that, the robust layer for getting the best balance between coverage and speed.
Right.
I think, that's why we saw this merger as such a crucial component of, improving the US's 5G competitiveness. Because once you have one competitive carrier, you start driving other carriers to be more aggressive and push harder on their rollouts as well. So I think, having a much more competitive new T-Mobile, I think has been a very positive thing for the industry.
Well said. I agree with you 100%. This has been a long time coming to put together very complementary spectrum assets.
Definitely. And I think with that, that kind of wraps us up this week. We hope that our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide us with insights on specific 5G topics for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech. I'm at Anshel Sog. And thanks again to John and T-Mobile for coming on to our inaugural standalone 5G episode. And we hope that you guys have a great weekend, and please tune again next week.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.